From ancient rapid-fire arrows to the strangest of tank designs. Stay tuned to number 1 to find out the most insane military weapons in history. Number 10. The Makuhitl. Dual-action weapons are always a great choice for battle. Ones that can cut an adversary and bash their head in are especially helpful when fighting in close combat. The Makuhitl was just that for the Aztecs. This thing was definitely intimidating to say the least. Simply looking at the weapon, the Makuhitl was 1 part jagged slicer and 1 part thick wooden club. The sides were covered with sharp volcanic rock, so it wasn't good for stabbing like a sword, but excellent for shredding flesh off of an enemy. Thankfully, the clubbing action was more commonly used in battle by the Aztecs, where the thick wooden mallet of this thing could knock out a sizable animal and easily take down a human being. The Aztecs liked this ability as it allowed them to drag their enemies back to camp to be used in ritual sacrifices. On second thought, maybe the jagged slicing action would have been a better way to lose the fight. Number 9. The Apache Helicopter. The Apache line of attack helicopters has been a popular choice for the US Army for decades. While the Army usually only consists of ground troops, this helicopter from Hades packs a punch that on-the-ground troops certainly appreciate for air support. The Apache helicopter is pretty much everything the Army needs: missiles for long-distance shots, cannons for shorter range, and sensors to help find the enemy. Basically, this thing can quickly clear the way for the ground troops to do their work, and do it much faster and safer than they would have done otherwise. One of the best aspects of the Apache is that the Army owns and operates each one. This makes things easier, as they don't have to tag team with another branch of the military to call in air support. With the Apache being an in-house product, the Army can take care of business swiftly and without any communication issues, making it an even more effective weapon and even more frightening for the enemy. Number 8. The M2 machine gun. Before we talk about the history of the M2, take a moment to like and subscribe for more fascinating videos from Zero to Hero. It's important to click that little notification bell too. Oh, and like this video. Machine guns are always a popular choice when going to war, but it's hard to believe that a gun invented all the way back in World War II would be any good in the modern era. But the M2 50 caliber machine gun has stood the test of time, and for good reason. This rapid-fire blaster is insanely powerful and has never let the US down. The M2 basically has the power of a small handheld cannon. It has been used for shooting at enemy troops on the ground, enemy vehicles in the field, and enemy aircraft in the sky. Not a lot of weapons can say they are good for 3 different sizes of a bad guy. The newer models of the M2, known as the M2A1, have even more features to help win a war. This model features a flash hiding suppressor so troops can use it in the dark and not give away their location due to the flash of light from each shot. It also boasts a quick change barrel and much faster reload times than its predecessor. With stats like these, it's unlikely the military will ever retire the M2 line of machine guns. Number 7. The Ball Tank. The ball tank is just what it sounds like, a large hamster wheel with soldiers inside, rolling through the battlefield shooting at the enemy. If nothing else, the visual alone could surprise the bad guys and scare them off. This weapon was great in terms of defense. Up to 3 soldiers could fit inside this impenetrable ball, fully protected, and get very close to enemy lines without a problem. However, the ball tank was not that great in terms of offense. The guns were never pointing in one direction for long enough to get off a good shot. Sometimes you'd shoot into the air, sometimes into the ground, and occasionally you'd get a lucky shot at the enemy. To make things worse, the ball tank had no windows, so the guys inside could never know if the next shot would hit a foe or a friend. Needless to say, nobody wants to fight alongside a rolling ball of death that shoots at complete random. The ball tank didn't last long, and the military opted for better options, like full-size tanks with windows. Number 6. The TOW Anti-Tank Missile. Tanks are awesome weapons to have in war. Even better, however, is an anti-tank missile. Seeing as basically nothing can stop a tank, these missiles can obviously be a great asset. The TOW Anti-Tank Missile is a tube-launched, optically tracked, and wire-guided missile that can blast a tank in an instant. Once upon a time, the US was one of very few countries to have tanks in battle, but over time, other nations have gained the technology. Fortunately for us, the TOW missile helps greatly, in a world where we are not alone in tank ownership. The TOW has been in use for the past few decades, so upgrades are always coming along. More recent models feature a bunker-busting missile that can blast a hole in the ground deep enough to tear apart a bunker full of baddies. The Arrow model of the missile can even explode just above an enemy tank, tearing the top off like a can of tuna. Chances are, more upgrades will be added over time, making the TOW missile a guaranteed mainstay of the US military for years to come. Number 5. The Chukonu. You can't get much better than automatic fire weaponry in a world long before automatic rifles. The Chinese had just that in their arsenal in the form of the Chukonu. This lightning-fast bow and arrow weapon featured a wooden box on top of a bow which immediately reloaded the device after every shot. Blast an arrow at the enemy and immediately be ready to shoot another. The thing was so fast it could launch 10 arrows in just 15 seconds. It was always much better to be on the offensive side rather than on the defense with this one. Even more amazing is that the Chukonu was known to be used in battle as late as the 1890s, well after modern firearms had been introduced to war. In addition to its rapid-fire ability, fighters were known to poison-tip the arrowheads, as if rapid-fire arrows aren't enough assurance of instant death. Number 4. The Corkscrew Tank. The US military has tons of great weapons for fighting, but the Soviets had their own crazy contraptions of chaos too. One such tool was the Corkscrew Tank. And yes, it is just about as cool as it sounds. The Corkscrew Tank was a huge armored tank with screw devices attached to the outside for digging in almost any terrain. This machine could tear through trees, blast through snow, and smash through ice like a car gliding down the highway. Surprisingly enough though, its failure came from the simple task of driving on flat land. Put this thing in the woods and it could shred the forest to mulch, but put it on a paved road and it's stuck. The screws weren't easy to use either. The driver had to simultaneously maneuver the tank and screws to dig the screws into the land, which was sometimes impossible. Trying to cut a straight line through the terrain was not going to happen, ever. Luckily, the Corkscrew Tank was very effective at its job of shredding the land where it needed so ground troops could get through. And it's a good thing, because if this beast of a vehicle ever ran into the enemy alone, it wouldn't stand a chance. Number 3. The Big Dog. The Big Dog is a pretty awesome looking machine. A bit impractical, but awesome looking. This giant truck on legs may look surprisingly familiar to the Star Wars fans out there, but it works a bit better than that, and it also has a history that predates the films. Back in the 1940s, GE worked with the military to develop the GE Quadruple, a four-legged truck machine that would walk along the land with a soldier maneuvering it with his own arms and legs. It was meant to give military personnel an easier way to carry supplies and travel through rough terrain. However, it was a very tough tool to use, remarkably clunky, and it never went further into development. Years later though, the project has been heavily tweaked and has led to the invention of the Big Dog. The newest edition of this real-life Imperial Walker sports an incredibly loud motor and stumbles along slower than the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. On the plus side, it can take a hit and catch itself from falling very easily, as well as carry tons of equipment with no problem. Eventually, this thing will be quiet and smooth and ready to freak out the enemy in an instant. Number 2. The Nest of Bees. Winning the award for the best weapon name of all time is the Chinese machine known as the Nest of Bees. Just the name alone could easily convince any foe to just give up and negotiate immediately. Basically a warfare version of a modern-day Nerf machine gun, Nest of Bees was a remarkably fast-shooting arrow launcher. The barrel of the device featured honeycomb-shaped tubes, each equipped with an arrow, each of which featured a small rocket. Light up the back end and this handheld cannon shoots out a slew of arrows at the enemy with little effort from the shooter. Some weapons featured up to 32 arrows that could be shot at once. As if that wasn't insane enough, imagine an entire platoon of Chinese fighters shooting with dozens of these units all at the same time. Number 1. The XF-85 Goblin. The XF-85 Goblin is a great name, the kind of name that instills fear into the enemy. although it could also be the kind of name you give to a clunky contraption that's bound to fail, like the US military's attempt at a flying aircraft carrier. The Goblin was a huge airplane that basically held smaller airplanes inside its bomb bay. The idea was simple: have a way to deliver fighter planes to battle, as well as a place for them to come back to base for refueling and repairs. Unfortunately, the only thing the Goblin would have been able to do effectively would have been to confuse the operators and the enemy. Test runs of the Goblin never went well. Not surprisingly, it was easy to drop the planes out of the belly of the beast, but hard to get them back in. During one test run, pilot Ed Schock tried to re-enter the Goblin and attach to the cables used for holding the plane in place. Unfortunately, the cable smashed through his cockpit, knocked him out, and dropped his plane. When he awoke, he had to save his plane from a complete dive, only to land it on the ground without any landing gear, because after all, these planes were meant to hook into the Goblin, not land on the ground. Luckily, the Goblin never saw a day in battle. Tell us what you think about these insane military inventions in the comments below, and take care.